My 3-year-old son took my hand just before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. He looked nervous. I crouched down and straightened his little blue suit. "Hey, buddy. What's wrong?" He looked toward the doors. Then he leaned closer and whispered, "Dad, she hurts me when you leave." I froze. I looked across the room. My future wife, Claire, was standing near the altar, smiling at the guests. She looked completely normal. Calm. Happy. The woman I was about to marry. I looked back at my son. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. Then he pointed at Claire. My stomach tightened. "Did she hurt you?" He nodded. I didn't react. Not because I didn't believe him. Because I didn't want him to know how scared I suddenly was. I pulled him closer. "Show me where." He touched his wrist. Then he whispered. "She said don't tell Dad." I looked at his tiny wrist. There was a faint red mark. My mind started racing. I wanted to walk straight over to Claire. Instead, I stayed calm. "Buddy, did Mommy hurt you?" He shook his head. "No." "Did Claire?" Another nod. Then he reached inside his little suit jacket. I expected him to pull out a toy. Instead, he pulled out a tiny plastic bag. Inside was something I recognized immediately. A small silver key. I stared at it. "Where did you get that?" He looked toward Claire again. "She gave it to me." My heart started pounding. Then he whispered something that made the entire wedding disappear around me. "She said this opens the room where she puts my things." I looked at Claire. Her smile was still there. But now I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. She wasn't looking at me. She was watching my son. I kept my voice low. "Buddy, what room?" He pointed toward the hallway behind the reception area. "The little room." I knew the room. Claire had told me it was a storage closet. She kept wedding decorations and boxes inside. I looked at the key in his hand. "Why does she put your things there?" He shrugged. "She says I'm bad." My chest tightened. I wanted to ask 100 questions. Instead, I hugged him. "Did she lock you in there?" He nodded. "Sometimes." I felt my hands go cold. "How long?" He held up 3 fingers. I didn't know whether he meant 3 minutes or 3 hours. At his age, time meant almost nothing. I looked toward Claire again. She was speaking to her mother. Then she glanced at us. Our eyes met. She smiled. I smiled back. Inside, I was terrified. I couldn't accuse her in front of 60 wedding guests without knowing exactly what had happened. My son tugged my sleeve. "Dad." "Yeah?" "Don't leave me." I swallowed hard. "I won't." He looked relieved. Then he reached into his pocket again. This time, he pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was covered in crooked blue lines. I opened it. There were 3 stick figures. One was me. One was my son. The third figure had long black hair. Claire. But beside her was a dark square. A door. Inside it, my son had drawn himself. I stared at the picture. "Who drew this?" He pointed at Claire. "She made me draw it." I looked at the date written in the corner. It was 2 days earlier. I felt something inside me shift. This wasn't a child's misunderstanding. Someone had been teaching my son what to fear. I stood up. My best man, Marcus, noticed my expression. He walked over. "Everything okay?" I handed him the key. Then I whispered, "I need you to do something for me." He looked at the key. "What?" "Go check that storage room." He nodded. But before he could leave, my son grabbed his hand. "Don't open it." Marcus looked at me. My son whispered, "She'll know." Marcus didn't move. He looked at me. Then at my son. "Why will she know?" My son pointed toward the hallway. "She watches." My stomach dropped. Marcus quietly walked away. I stayed beside my son. I kept smiling whenever guests looked toward us. Inside, I was barely holding myself together. A few minutes later, Marcus returned. His face had changed. He leaned close. "There's a camera." "What?" "In the storage room." He showed me a picture on his phone. A tiny black camera had been mounted high on a shelf. My hands went cold. "Is it recording?" "I don't know." I looked at my son. He was staring at the floor. I crouched beside him. "Buddy, has Claire ever made you go into that room?" He nodded. "Why?" "She says I need to think." My jaw tightened. "How many times?" He held up 4 fingers. Then he corrected himself. 5. Marcus heard it too. He looked at me. We need to stop this wedding. I nodded. But before we could move, Claire appeared. She smiled at Marcus. Everything okay? Marcus smiled back. Just helping with something. She looked at my son. What are you two talking about? My son immediately stepped behind me. Claire's smile disappeared for half a second. Then it returned. Come here, sweetheart. He shook his head. No. Claire's eyes hardened. It was quick. Almost invisible. But I saw it. So did Marcus. She turned to me. Why is he acting strange? I answered calmly. He's tired. She nodded. Maybe I should take him. I stepped between them. No. She stared at me. What? I'll handle him. For the first time all morning, Claire looked nervous. Then her phone buzzed. She checked the screen. Her face went pale. She quickly put it away. I asked. Who was that? No one. Marcus looked at me. Then my son whispered something. Dad. What? He pointed toward Claire's phone. That man told her not to let you see the videos. I froze. Videos? Claire looked at my son. And this time, she didn't smile. I didn't ask Claire about the videos. Not yet. I didn't want her to know exactly what my son had told me. I leaned toward Marcus. Call the police. He nodded and walked outside. Claire watched him leave. Why is Marcus leaving? He needed some air. She stared at me. You're acting strange. So are you. Her face tightened. Then she reached for my son's hand. He immediately pulled away. Don't touch me. The words came out quietly. But everyone nearby heard them. Claire looked shocked. I knelt beside my son. You're okay. He nodded. Then he reached into his pocket again. This time, he pulled out a tiny memory card. I stared at it. What's this? He whispered. From the room. Claire suddenly stepped forward. Give me that. My son moved behind me. I stood. No. Her expression changed completely. You don't understand what that is. Then explain it. She said nothing. I held the memory card between my fingers. Marcus returned with 2 officers. Claire immediately started crying. This is ridiculous. He's ruining our wedding because his son is confused. One officer asked everyone to remain calm. I handed him the memory card. My son says this came from a camera in the storage room. The officer looked at Claire. Is there a camera? She didn't answer. Her mother stepped forward. I know about the camera. Everyone turned toward her. Claire stared at her mother. Mom? Her mother looked at me. I thought it was only for security. I asked. Security for what? She hesitated. Then she said. I don't know. The officer asked Claire to explain. Claire started crying harder. I was afraid. Of what? I asked. She looked directly at my son. Of him. My blood ran cold. His 3. She shook her head. You don't know what he's like when you're gone. My son squeezed my leg. Then he whispered. Dad, that's not true. I looked down at him. He was trembling. The officer asked Claire whether she had recorded my son. She finally admitted it. Yes. Why? She looked at me. And said. Because I needed proof. Proof of what? Her answer made Marcus swear under his breath. Proof that he was dangerous. I stared at Claire. My 3-year-old son was standing behind my leg, holding onto my pants. Dangerous. She nodded. He has episodes. What episodes? He screams. He throws things. He scratches. I looked at my son. He was quiet. Too quiet. I asked the officer whether we could review the footage. He told me we could preserve it, but we shouldn't watch it ourselves if it was part of an investigation. Claire immediately said, you don't need to see it. That made me more suspicious. The officer asked where the camera had been installed. Claire pointed toward the hallway. Marcus went with another officer to check it. A few minutes later, they returned with the camera. The memory card was still inside. Then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. A video had been sent to me. I opened it. It showed my son sitting alone inside the storage room. He was crying. Claire stood outside the door. I heard her voice. Stop crying. My son begged her to open the door. She didn't. Then she said. Your dad won't believe you. My stomach turned. The video continued. Claire walked away. My son cried harder. I looked at Claire. She had gone completely pale. I asked, "How many times did you do this?" She didn't answer. The officer asked her again. She finally whispered, 6. My son buried his face against me. I held him tightly. Then another video arrived. This one was different. It showed someone else entering the room. A man. He was wearing a dark jacket. He walked directly toward my son. I didn't recognize him. Neither did Marcus. But Claire did. The moment she saw the screen, she started shaking. I looked at her. "Who is that?" She whispered. "My brother." The officer immediately asked, "Why was he inside the room?" Claire covered her face. And my son suddenly said, "That's the man who told me not to tell Daddy." The room went silent. I looked at Claire. Then at the officer. "Where is her brother?" Claire shook her head. "I don't know." The officer asked for his name. She gave it. Marcus searched the guest list. He wasn't there. That made no sense. This was supposed to be our wedding. Why would Claire's brother secretly enter a storage room with my son? The officer asked whether Claire had invited him. No. Then how did he get inside? Claire didn't answer. I looked at the video again. The man had clearly known where the camera was. He looked directly toward it before approaching my son. Then he crouched down. I couldn't hear everything. But one sentence was clear. "Your dad can't know." My hands tightened. My son had been telling the truth. The officer asked Claire what her brother wanted. She finally broke down. He was trying to scare him. "Why?" She looked at me. "Because he didn't want me to marry you." I stared at her. "What does your brother have against me?" She hesitated. Then she said, "He thinks you're responsible for what happened to our father." I had never met her father. He had died years before I met Claire. I looked at her. "What happened to him?" "He lost everything." "Why are you blaming me?" "I'm not." She wiped her face. "My brother is." The officer asked whether her brother had threatened her. Claire nodded. "He said if I married you, he'd make sure your son was afraid of me." My stomach turned. "So you knew?" "I knew he hated you." "That wasn't my question." She closed her eyes. "I knew he had been talking to my son." "And you still went ahead with the wedding?" "I thought I could control him." The officer shook his head. "You can't control someone who is threatening a child." Then my son tugged my sleeve. "Dad." I looked down. He pointed at the memory card. "There are more videos." I looked at the officer. He nodded. "We're going to find out exactly what happened." And suddenly, the wedding wasn't the story anymore. My son's safety was. The officers took the memory card and the camera. The wedding guests were asked to leave the room. Nobody knew what to say. Some looked at Claire. Others looked at me. I didn't care anymore. I carried my son outside. He was still holding my hand. "Dad." "Yeah? Are you mad at me?" My heart broke. "No. I didn't want to ruin your wedding." "You didn't." He looked relieved. "You saved me." He leaned against me. A few minutes later, Marcus came outside. He looked serious. The officers found more footage. What did they find? They found recordings from the last 2 weeks. I waited. Claire's brother entered the room 3 times. My stomach tightened. 3? Marcus nodded. And Claire was there twice. I closed my eyes. So she knew. Yes. That was the part one couldn't forgive. Not the secret room. Not the camera. Not even her brother. She knew my son was afraid. And she still expected me to marry her. One officer came outside. "Sir, there's something else." He handed me a still image from one of the videos. It showed Claire's brother holding a small envelope. "What is that?" "We don't know yet." Then the officer showed me another image. This time, Claire was holding the same envelope. The officer said they found messages between them discussing me. I read the first one. "He can't know about the insurance policy." I looked at Claire. "What insurance policy?" She wouldn't answer. The officer continued. "We're going to need to ask you some questions." Claire began crying. I felt numb. She hadn't just hidden what was happening to my son. There was something else. Something involving me. My name. And money. I looked at my son. He was playing quietly with the buttons on his suit. I had almost married a woman who had been keeping secrets around him. And now I was about to learn exactly how far those secrets went. The insurance policy explained everything. Claire's brother had discovered that I had a life insurance policy through my employer. Claire was listed as the beneficiary. I had never thought much about it. It was part of my employee benefits. But her brother had. He had been pressuring Claire to marry me quickly. The wedding wasn't just about love anymore. They wanted access to something that would only matter if something happened to me. The officers found messages proving it. One message from her brother said, "Once you're married, everything changes." Another said, "Make sure the boy doesn't interfere." I felt sick reading that. Claire eventually admitted she had known about the policy. She claimed she never wanted me hurt. But she had allowed her brother around my son. She had watched him scare him. She had locked my son in that room. And she had kept quiet. That was enough. The wedding was cancelled. Claire was taken for questioning. Her brother was later arrested after investigators found additional evidence connecting him to the threats. I never saw Claire again. My son and I went home that evening. He changed out of his little suit and climbed into bed. Before falling asleep, he looked at me. "Dad." "Yeah? Can I sleep with you tonight?" I smiled. "Of course." He curled up beside me. I stayed awake for a while, listening to his breathing. That morning, I had been preparing to marry the woman I thought would become his second parent. Instead, my 3-year-old son had saved both of us. He didn't understand insurance. He didn't understand manipulation. He didn't understand why adults lied. He only knew something was wrong. And he trusted me enough to tell me. I think about that every time I see the tiny silver key. I kept it. Not as a reminder of what happened. As a reminder that sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one telling you the truth. And if my son hadn't taken my hand before I walked down that aisle, I might have walked straight into the biggest mistake of my life.